So sanctions are in place, but North Korea, they've shown no regard for the UN's attempts to curtail their weapons program. In fact, if this pace continues, North Korea will launch more missiles this year than any other year. Now take a look at this. North Korea now has conducted 14 tests this year. This info is courtesy of CNN. They've launched 21 missiles total, which is the second most in the Kim Jong-un era. And at this pace, they could easily pass the 24 missiles they launched last year. But I want to take a step back and look at this from Japan's side. There is so much press about the North Korea conflict through the eyes of the U.S., China, and South Korea, but it's worth taking a look at this from the Japanese point of view. They are in a geographic proximity to Pyongyang, but it's more than just that. Japan is far from an afterthought when it comes to the North Korean tensions. Let's first examine Japan's role in the North Korean conflict. The country is key in the American military plan. This think tank lays it all out. The U.S. Air Force bases in Japan can be used to launch direct attacks on North Korea and speedily transport additional U.S. Marines to reinforce the U.S. 8th Army based in Korea. U.S. naval vessels stationed in Japan can hunt down North Korean submarines, as well as bringing in more troops and vital supplies. The big takeaway? The U.S. has a big incentive to protect the Japanese.
Japanese have not been on the front line, obviously. Geographically, they're separated by the Sea of Japan. So the acquisition by North Korea of an arsenal of missiles capable of reaching Japan is a new experience for the Japanese, new meaning in the last decade or so.
That threat has tested Japan's military capabilities. Experts like Smith point out Japan's constitution says the military should only be used to protect the country, not to attack others. But here's what to watch out for.
I think what's happening inside Japan today is as the North Koreans have accelerated and become more persistent in sending these missiles in the direction of Japan, I think more and more Japanese are wondering whether that defensive approach is really sufficient.
After the missile launch over Hokkaido, the U.S. and South Korea will be interested to see how much Japan will increase its military presence, perhaps pivoting from a philosophy that's remained largely unchanged since World War II.
They are not going to initiate an interception of a North Korean ballistic missile. What I do think is under conversation, and I would be surprised if we didn't hear more about it soon, is that the U.S. and Japan are probably consulting quite closely along with South Korea about what they want to do together to try to deter the North Koreans from continuing this kind of provocative missile flight.
The response from Japan is getting a lot of attention. We already mentioned the public alert for those in Hokkaido, but Japan did not have a military response after this missile flew over the Japanese island. Now, I talked with a man named Fred Fleitz, who is a former CIA analyst. The big question I wanted to ask, why didn't Japan shoot down the North Korea missile that they launched yesterday?
Well, you know, there are some unanswered questions about why this happened. I don't think Japan expected this to happen. There have been 7 missiles of this type, either ICBMs or so-called space launch vehicles since 1998. Only the one in 98 overflew Japan, and Japan was so angry, North Korea went out of its way not to fire missiles over Japan until yesterday. So why did it do that? Well, there's 2 reasons. One, maybe it was sending a message to Japan, or 2, it could be that the North Koreans were worried if they fired a missile southward, which they usually do, we would have interpreted it as an attack on Guam and would have shot it down. So my guess is the Japanese did not expect this, which is why they didn't shoot at it.
So then does that mean that now that it's elicited this sort of reaction, do you think North Korea tries to fly another missile down the road over Japanese territory?
I think there's a possibility of that. And what we're seeing here is the next logical step in the development of an ICBM. North Korea has tested some missiles over the Sea of Japan using a very steep trajectory to avoid flying over Japan, but those are not normal trajectories. To actually test an ICBM at its maximum range, it needs a normal trajectory, not this extremely steep, lofted trajectory that goes, higher than the space station. It has to operate a missile in normal conditions, and I think we might see that over Japan.
So with that being said, does that put Japan in a position to test out its missile defense system against another North Korea missile test?
I suspect that's coming, and the Japanese are worried because when a missile's being shot over their territory, they can't be sure whether it's an attack. They can't be sure whether it may malfunction and land on Japanese territory. And they've made clear they will shoot down these missiles if they go over Japanese territory. And my guess is the only reason this didn't happen this time, as I said, is because I think they were caught off guard.
Why fire near Japan now?
Well, you see, we don't know. Was this a provocation in reaction to the joint exercises that we're conducting right now with South Korea? Was it a message to Japan? Or was it simply a decision by North Korea? We can't fire it southward because the U.S. will shoot it down because we've threatened to attack Guam. I suspect it was fired over Japan for the last reason. It may have had nothing to do with the joint exercises. North Korea gambled that this is the only way it could test its missile because of the concern of it being shot down if it went southward.
You know, what's the limit for North Korea to provoke its neighbors and some of the U.S. allies without actually coming under attack from the South Koreans, the Japanese, or the Americans?
I think we're getting very close to that limit right now because the United States and its allies are getting to the point where they can't be sure whether one of these missile tests are an attack or whether one of them may fail. And out of caution, we may have a policy to shoot down every missile that leaves North Korean airspace. I fear that may be coming.